Today we have some crazy stories of psycho parents and relatives. We'll get into that in a bit, but first, parents keep on asking how much money I make every day. I do a side hustle and they keep on asking how much I make every day, and it's really annoying. I even told them to stop asking as I need peace, as it will help massively in my side hustle, but they still disrespect it and keep asking. And every time I tell them no and to stop asking, they'll go and talk bad about me behind my back, saying things like I'm not making money, I should be making thousands right now, etc. And also, every time my parents see me, that's the only question they ask. They barely ask me questions such as how I'm doing, am I okay, etc. But if they were to ask me those questions such as how I'm doing, they'll follow up asking me how much money I've made from my side hustle today. It always happens. This makes me think that they clearly don't care about how I'm doing. If I'm okay, they just ask those questions to get close to me and then ask the real question they came to me for, which is how much money I've made today. If there happens to be a day where my parents choose not to ask me the money question, they will literally not talk to me for the whole day, as I guess they don't see the need to, as all they care about from me is money. I feel like an ATM to them. What should I do to combat all of this? It's annoying. I feel unwanted too. I'm 21 years old, by the way, guys, if anyone is wondering. So my question is, do they just keep asking how much you're making, but not actually withdrawing, asking for the money? Is this like a down the road thing, like they're waiting until you have enough stacks of cash to finally try to make a withdrawal? If I were in OP shoes, I'd probably go to generic answers and then just keep giving that until it's nothing, hopefully. I mean, if they ask, how much did you make from your side hustle today? And I said, a decent amount, and they keep pressing to know the exact number. Like, surely at some point, if you just keep giving it, as long as they're not like actually abusive people, surely if you just keep giving a generic answer, eventually they'll stop, right? Otherwise, you especially know that they've got some other plans going on. Trish Loves Dolphins wrote, they're sizing you up as a cash cow. Stop telling them anything and just let them crap talk. I'd also advise that you get a checking account they're not connected to, put a passcode on the account, and not keep your cash at home. Also, move out. This might sound extreme, but no one believes their parents will steal from them until it's too late. I've seen way too many people lose thousands of dollars because they trusted their parents to have a basic level of decency. OP responded saying, you're right, I've had a strong feeling they see me as a cash cow. That's why I mentioned that I feel like an ATM, and honestly, I've stopped telling them, but they keep on carrying on asking and then talking bad. But you're right, I'm going to keep telling them to stop asking, and I can't let their crap talk get to me. And you're right about parents stealing money. This is also why I don't tell my parents about my finances. Only big mistake I made is telling them I do side hustle. They happened to go research the side hustle on YouTube and saw the potential money it could make, so since then, all the crazy asking started. Also, hi, I'm Steven, and if you guys enjoy crazy stories of entitled parents, why not hit those like and subscribe buttons down below? That said, our next story is Father-in-law feels owed time with grandchildren. My father-in-law lives in our town, and for the past few years, since my husband and I moved here and had children, we've seen him regularly, at least weekly, and allowed him to be a part of many family events. Christmas morning, trick-or-treating, etc. The problem is, I can't stand him, and I think recently the fact that he's a perpetual part of my life is getting to me. My husband and I talk about this at length and really don't know how to handle it, as he's constantly applying pressure to see us, and when he doesn't hear from us even for a few days, makes us stink. I'd love to know what those who have local grandparents and parents have in terms of expectations for time spent. Now for details, apologies, it was impossible to be concise. Off the bat, important to share that undoubtedly my female 34, father-in-law 78, is a textbook narcissist. Undiagnosed, as the worst ones are, he was a terrible husband, verbally, emotionally, and perhaps physically abused my mother-in-law and brother-in-law, who is 10 years older than my husband. He really freaked up my brother-in-law, who at 44 is also a huge narcissist with depression and other mental health challenges, and he cheated on my mother-in-law when my husband was 8. Because they divorced after that, my husband miraculously ended up really unscathed and had a great childhood and fine relations with his dad, likely due to his mother's shielding him and playing the role of primary caregiver. In fact, father-in-law somehow managed to remain a part of everyone's lives, having some custody of my husband. Brother-in-law was an adult by the time of the split, combining holidays with my mother-in-law and her new husband, and just generally being around. When I first met my husband, father-in-law was in a new relationship with a woman who was wonderful. This was after 3 failed marriages, my mother-in-law being his third, and a long-term partnership, around 18 years. When you first meet him, he seems like a character more than anything. Very grandiose, clearly thinks he's charming and full of anecdotes. Anyone who gets to know him, however, finds that the anecdotes are the same and tired. And he can actually be quite rude, domineering of conversations, selfish, and stingy. His girlfriend broke up with him after 8 years, which at first seemed like a shock to us, but quickly was not all that surprising, given how much better she was than him. She explained the breakup to him well, that for all his good qualities, she simply couldn't handle his bad ones anymore. In particular, how he acts in public. See rudeness, stinginess, extra pompous behavior. The breakup devastated him, and while he initially seemed to reflect on the feedback she gave, it quickly became her fault for the split. And he, being entirely alone in his life, became increasingly needy and more present in our lives than I've ever known him to be. We had just had our first child, and thick in the throes of newborn life, weren't able to offer him as much company as my brother-in-law was able to. Although I will note, he was still seeing us for an hour or so weekly. He became increasingly codependent with my brother-in-law, spending many evenings at his house late into the night, attending parties my brother-in-law hosted, and even vacationing with my brother-in-law and family. Now, brother-in-law can also get irritated at his dad, and their relationship is a constant roller coaster of fighting, or being attached at the hip. I'm sure there were complex psychological reasons for why brother-in-law was so supportive of him, but darling husband and I later realized that his motivation was at least partially financial. We realized this when we found out that our father-in-law bought a vacation home in an area brother-in-law loves and put brother-in-law's name on the deed. Now, that situation could be an entirely different post, but very quickly a fight ensued. Brother-in-law cut off all contact with father-in-law, they sold the house, and 2 years later, still have not spoken. This fallout left father-in-law with no one, except for us. We tried to keep the same cadence of visits with him that we always had, weekly or so, dinners or quick visits with our children. However, driven largely by the fact that he really is alone, the requests to see us have done nothing but increase. Our ability to tolerate him waxes and wanes over time, so over the course of the last few years, we have had times that we've been more amenable to seeing him than not. Important to note my use of the word tolerate, because at best, when we spend time with him, it's fine. At worst, it's painstaking. It's also important for me to share the ways he's guilting us to see him. First is the explicit, shameless guilt. Haven't heard from you in a while, or I'm not getting any younger, or I won't be around forever, so I need to spend time with my granddaughters. He is not shy to tell us what we should be doing in terms of involving him. Second is trying to buy us and make us feel indebted through thinly veiled offers to help. This is where I struggle the most. Years ago, he gifted us a large sum of money, which we've kept in savings, that he explained was to make us even with my brother-in-law, who he had lent the same amount of money to years prior and never received repayment or mention of repayment for. Father-in-law said that in doing so, he wouldn't have any worries of inequity at the time of his death when his will was being executed. I wasn't super comfortable taking the money, but knowing it was to equalize with the brother-in-law helped. Additionally, my father-in-law has given us some significant gifts. He's paid to install a safety fence around our pool. I justified this as something for my daughters, and gave us a new washer-dryer as a Christmas gift. I didn't really want either of these gifts to happen because I felt they wouldn't be guilt-free, and because we were able to pay for them ourselves, but father-in-law practically begged, as he wanted to contribute as we had just moved into a new house. Additionally, my own parents had contributed similarly to our home as well. Again, another way I justified, since his offers to pay for us have not ceased. But my husband and I have agreed we will not accept anything from him again to avoid feeling associated guilt. It's obvious that his offers are a way to have control. In fact, following his fallout with brother-in-law, he quickly removed brother-in-law from his will, instead bequeathing his share to a local animal shelter. He did this, as he explained to us, because he knew if he left it all to my husband, we would feel compelled to share it with my brother-in-law. Third and finally, he guilt trips us by constantly comparing what he gets to what my parents get in terms of time with us and my daughters. My parents are also local, much younger, 60, still working, have a house with a nursery and kid toys and treats, and are equipped to care for our children. We see them every week or 2 weeks, but in general have more meaningful time with them too. We vacation with them, and they're the backup caretakers for our daughters, keeping them for nights or weekends when we're away, or being backup care on snow days or sick days. He is constantly whining about not having time as compared to them. And while we could explain all of the reasons that logistically my parents get more time with us and the girls, ultimately we prefer them because they're normal, loving, and supportive, no-strings-attached parents who, on top of it all, are people we enjoy being around. And of course, I'm biased to my own family, but my husband fully agrees. So all of this huge context aside, I am really struggling on how to handle him. We've been living in a cycle of excuses on putting off seeing him, and then seeing him when we have to throw him a bone, only to be guilted about it not being enough. Despite his terrible past, he's never explicitly done anything wrong to us, nor is there any tangible evidence I can point to explaining why I don't want him around. He obviously doesn't take feedback either, so a rational discussion about his behavior is off the table. And he's not a normal person who reads the room, so he won't get a clue and back off. I'm just wondering, how much is he owed to see us, given all of this? He's a grandfather after all, and my daughters do have fun with him, but they have fun with everyone. And if the answer is nothing or not much, how do we manage making that happen? I think it wouldn't hurt necessarily to try to go for a Hail Mary where you're just straight up honest with him and you tell him, hey, the more you keep guilt tripping us, the less we want to spend time with you, and even tell him you would love for him to be around more, but it has to not be a stressful situation. That all of these gifts that are essentially bribery is not a reason or a justification, and that he has to be able to work with you guys and work well with you guys. And that's kind of how you would salvage that going forward, I would hope. CB Datnala wrote, "Gifts don't mean you have to do what someone says. It's okay to say that you're busy. You are busy. Give the whining the importance it deserves," which is not very much. If you want to be proactive about it, your husband can explain that the more he pushes and guilts, the less he'll see you. If you honestly think you can train him into better behavior, that is. If nothing you do is ever going to be enough for him, why bother in the first place? Save your energy. OP responded to that saying, "I saw someone on another sub and post say something along the lines of, if nothing is good enough, then nothing is what they get." That said, our next story is, religious kids of entitled parents, what passive-aggressive Bible verses can I post as my status? Mine have forced me to go to church as a kid and stopped trying when I started wearing revealing clothing as an adult. They only practice so far as there's a church service, but never did Bible reading and prayer with us outside of giving grace for food. They are hypocritical in how they act towards outsiders and their kids. They care about money more than most things. I'm convinced my dad would sell me to a groom for the right price in a heartbeat. They can't get mad at me for posting Bible verses that reflects their hypocrisy. I immediately went to the comments of this post just to see what's there, and there's a lot of suggestions. Just from scrolling through, the most common I see from the comments is Matthew, such as Matthew 6:5, "And when you pray, do not be like the hypocrites, for they love to pray standing in the synagogues and on the street corners to be seen by others. Truly, I tell you, they have received their reward in full." It would be almost like putting out a subtweet essentially saying that their family are fake Christians. Our next story is Entitled Parents from History, Dee Dee Blanchard, the mother of all fakes. Dee Dee Blanchard. The name should curdle your blood alongside any parent who's weaponized their child for personal gain. This wasn't a case of overzealous soccer sidelines or misplaced "my kid is the best" brags. Dee Dee wasn't just an entitled parent, she was a full-blown manipulator, wielding Munchausen syndrome by proxy like a twisted scepter. For the uninitiated, MSBP is a horrific scenario where a caregiver, usually a parent, invents or exaggerates a child's illness for attention, sympathy, and in some cases, cold, hard cash. Dee Dee, in this monstrous play, transformed her daughter Gypsy Rose into a full-time medical drama. Wheelchairs, feeding tubes, a never-ending parade of specialists, all a grotesque facade to cast Dee Dee as the long-suffering saint caring for a tragically afflicted child. The depths of her depravity are enough to curdle your stomach. Gypsy Rose, subjected to this abuse from the cradle, was essentially imprisoned in her own body. Imagine never being able to walk on your own 2 feet, to savor a meal without a feeding tube, all because your mother craved the spotlight more than anything. Now, I'm not here to condone Gypsy Rose's actions. Spoiler alert, she orchestrated her mother's murder. But can you truly cast blame on someone for snapping after a lifetime of stolen experiences, fabricated illnesses, and a complete erosion of their own reality? Dee Dee wasn't just controlling, she was a thief. She stole Gypsy Rose's childhood, her autonomy, her very sense of self. This case was a chilling expose of the profound damage entitled parents can inflict. Dee Dee wasn't a helicopter mom, she was a soul-sucking emotional abuser. Her insatiable need for validation fueled a waking nightmare for Gypsy Rose. So, the next time you encounter a parent endlessly droning on about their child's supposed ailments, take a moment to question the narrative, because sometimes the real sickness isn't a virus or a genetic disorder. It's the twisted minds behind the charade. Let this be a cautionary tale. Dee Dee Blanchard wasn't just an anomaly, she's a stark reminder of the monstrous potential that can lurk behind a facade of love and selflessness. So I had no idea about this case. As soon as I read this story, I just had to go look up just a little bit. Basically, from what I understand, almost immediately into Gypsy Rose's life, their parent became convinced they had a litany of disorders. Had them tested for sleep apnea at 3 months old, thought they had a chromosomal disorder, eventually became convinced they had muscular dystrophy and forced Gypsy Rose to use a walker. At some point when she was about 7 or 8, she apparently scraped her knee and the mother turned around and forced them to use a wheelchair from there on. Gypsy Rose taught herself how to read by using Harry Potter books. Like, this whole thing is so crazy. You can't condone necessarily what she did, but you kind of understand. Like, I can't lie, if I was on the jury, I would be thinking about this one for a very long time. Able Grocery 2353 wrote, "I feel the same way you do. Lately, I joined some Facebook groups and the majority of them believe Gypsy Rose belongs in prison for life and that she was never abused. They will passionately defend that position. I just don't see how anyone can blame the girl. They'll say murder wasn't the logical thing. Well, how the heck would the girl know anything about logic or real-life problem solving when her mom kept her from living any resemblance of a life? Did she do something awful? Yes, but something awful was being done to her and all she wanted was an escape." Our next story is My Dad is Psycho. My little sister, 16, was adopted after growing up in the foster care, suffered from abuse and SA, and has autism and depression on top of it all. She tried ending things once already. She keeps a lot to herself, but everyone in the family, parents and 4 brothers and sisters, knows that she gets triggered by some movies' plots and the news. The news these days are death, murder, genocide, R-word. I think we're all aware of that. But yet, my father always wants everybody to sit down to watch the news. And it's like an obligation for all of us. He puts it on when we eat dinner. During the days, he stays on 7 out of 7, 24-hour news and information's channel. It's really affecting us all because it's depressing, because the images stay in our heads. And my sister is very, very affected by that. She doesn't eat much anymore, talk even less than before, doesn't sleep much, doesn't look happy anymore. We talk to our dad about it, of course, but he says we have to be aware of what the world is like. He says she has to know so she doesn't trust anybody on the street. I found it incredibly ridiculous because she already got abused most of her life. She has physical scars and mental scars to remind her of that. And she is more than aware since she was the one on the news. So yeah, he won't change his mind about it and no one can really do anything. We tried to make him change the channel while we ate, but he won't eat or let us eat dinner if he can't put on the news. Ready and open for any advice? Father forcing sister to watch news. Personally, I don't really know what you can do. This guy sounds so absorbed in his own personal rabbit hole. While I do think it's obviously a good thing to be aware of current events and how the world is going, just like about any other addiction, being obsessed with the news is never going to be a healthy thing. And is it ever going to be a mentally good thing either? The news, by a large margin, is almost always depressing stuff. It's kind of what gets the clicks. People in the comments asked OP about their mom, and apparently their mom wants to avoid angering them by going against their wishes. So, who really is the abusive one here? Orphan Izzy wrote, maybe you could do some research on the effects of trauma and triggers, etc., and find some compelling information to show your dad. I don't know that it would work, but it's the best thing I can come up with. Or if he doesn't want to eat while the news is not on, then tell him to come back when you guys are finished. I mean, I don't know how he would react to that, but he doesn't have to eat while the news isn't on. He can eat later when you guys are no longer at the table. OP responded saying, he knows all that. He attended therapy with my sister and our mom when they started fostering her. He was very understanding before, but as he grew older, he's becoming more and more severe and paranoid. That said, this next story is, my parents won't let me home. I'm 18-year-old male. Just when I approached 18, I was sectioned and had to go to a psychiatric hospital due to people thinking I'm paranoid, and my outbursts and my mental health was really poor. My dad, I felt, has always provoked me. We don't always get on. I'm high-functioning autistic. He's always been hard on me and used to film me when something would stress me out, despite my mom telling him not to. There has been occasions like once we ran out of food and I asked my dad to get some, and he refused. I was irate, so I kicked the door. He then threatened the police. I wanted him to take me to my grandparents, but he refused, so it escalated and he called the police. Latest incident was him having loud music and I asked him to turn it down, and he wouldn't. And I asked if after I came home he could turn it down, but he wouldn't and says he doesn't care and can do what he wants. I was shouting. He then threatened the police and threatened to film me again. So I walked out and he followed, which triggered me. I'm annoyed at my mom as well in these situations, as she puts up with my dad and gives me the crap that she can't control him, she says. So does that mean she just lets him do what he wants? It can be a toxic dynamic. Anyway, I was discharged from the hospital and my mom made it very clear I couldn't come home. Their reasons are that I don't get on with my dad and they want me to be independent, and they think it's not good for me living at home because I do nothing due to my depression. When I've said I'll look for something to do and I can learn things to be independent and I don't need to be independent yet. As for my dad, since the last incident, I have been getting on better with him, but I don't think that's a good enough reason. I've been staying with my grandparents who are 87 and 93, and I worry they won't be around forever. I just feel very unsettled not being at home, and it's a vicious cycle that I don't think my parents are being fair. So I rant at them and they say the same thing, that they're in touch with services to find me supported accommodation when I don't think I could cope with the responsibilities and I don't want to be there. But there's no talking to them, as that only gets me into a state, and my dad says I can't ever come home. I'm lost and feel alone. Any advice would be appreciated, and honest opinions. Honestly, I think supported accommodations doesn't necessarily sound like a bad thing for OP. I'm wondering how much just afraid of the unknown is causing OP to kind of act that way. Ultimately, whether OP likes it or not, their parents kind of said, we just can't deal with this anymore and we're trying to find a way to make it work. Obviously, I don't think ranting at their parents is going to get OP anything and may even further hurt things. I think if their parents can get supported accommodation for OP should try it and go for it, especially considering their grandparents really won't be around forever. 7 That's a Nope wrote, supported accommodations can help you learn how to manage the responsibilities of living more independently. There are usually rules in those settings too though, and things like kicking in doors won't likely be tolerated, and you will have to take on certain responsibilities for taking care of yourself. Cooperating with your parents to set up supported accommodations for you is probably going to be your best option. And while you're living more independently, you can work on improving your relationship with your dad. OP responded saying, thanks. I just don't understand why they're so reluctant to let me home at the moment. More adults are living with their parents, some for very long. Our next story is, my 22 female to male, weird uncle 35 plus male and grandmother 60 plus female made me show them my body. I've been homeless for a while now and have been no contact with my birth family for years now over trans debate stuff that was a roadblock in my healing journey. However, I've had enough of the bench surfing, so I finally contacted my grandmother, 60-plus-year-old female, and asked if I could stay with her. She and my grandfather, 70-plus-year-old male, took me in and have been trying to respect the trans thing. I managed to convince them that I have a you-know-what now, so they would try harder. And it's been going a lot better. This morning, I woke up in a cold sweat and unable to move due to low blood sugar, so I texted my grandmother for help. that being bringing me a bowl of sugary cereal. She walked in with my uncle, whom began telling me to whip it out and prove I'm now a male if I want him to respect my identity. I was sick, weak, sweaty, and uncomfortable overall, but my grandmother was in the room wanting to see as well, so she didn't put a stop to it despite me expressing I was uncomfortable in the moment. I was desperate and I wasn't thinking, so I just showed my packer a little bit and some convincing you-know-what pics to appease and convince them both. I know that may make this my fault and I accept that. I later tried to talk about it with my grandparents and mentioned that it's wrong and weird for grandparents and uncles to pressure adult nephews or grandchildren into showing their genitals to them, especially when they all know I have SA trauma. But they said to just don't think about it. And I can't stop crying. I now have to hide my legs because I relapsed after being SH-free for months. I'm not asking for sympathy, reassurance, and I'm not here to talk about my poor coping skills. I just genuinely don't know what to do. I feel disgusting. I need a professional, but I'm still in the process of getting insurance and an ID, so I feel like there's nothing more I can do. Cops are not an option. I just need advice or coping mechanism ideas. Any help is greatly appreciated. Obviously, I think if there's any way that OP can swing any kind of living situation away from these people, that's clearly going to be the best thing. That said, I definitely sympathize with OP. There was some medical stuff that went on with me lately, and I confided about it to one of my relatives, who then just turned around and mentioned it to another relative that I don't really speak to blatantly without even thinking that maybe they should consult me or think about what I may want to disclose before just talking about my medical stuff. And of course, when the people who were told the medical info hear how I felt about that being shared with them, they respond, "Oh, you're talking to family, it's not a big deal." My situation is not even remotely close to approaching how serious OP's is, but it left me feeling like, well, screw not only my feelings, concerns, but also my privacy then, right? Because we're family. LooseBike5654 wrote, "Just think about getting what you need out of them while you can. Get your ID and insurance sorted out. Once you get what you need or can, split. Don't say goodbye or explain why. Disappear like a thief in the night. Don't cry over losing them. Treat the removal like surgery. Cold and sterile steel of determination, cutting away the tumors in your life because that's what they are. Tumors. Clumps of cancer that are draining you of your vitality. They serve no purpose in your life, so treat them as you would any disease or any parasite that latches onto. Their tears over you removing such venomous leeches, ones who use the word family as a weapon, are nothing compared to the tears they have squeezed from you in order to water their own egos. Focus on your plan. Focus on Freedom Day. Once you sever these ties that bind, you will be free to seek out and build your own found family. But until you do, focus on not letting the heat of your emotions burn you out and turn your progress to ash. I survived because the fire inside me burned brighter than the fire around me are words that guided me through the years as I went through my own problems of youth with selfish and bigoted idiots as parental figures. Once you're no longer being drowned in their sea of misery, you can burn brightly and let your light shine out as a beacon for others who are struggling to keep from being extinguished. OP responded to that saying, "First of all, I just want to let you know that this is the most heroic, vigilante-esque, epic piece of advice I have ever received. Reading this felt euphoric and loving, so for that, I'd like to thank you so much for this comment. I implore you for your journey as well. I'd like you to know that I'm rooting for you as well. This made me smile. Thank you." Our next story is, what should I do about my parents? 15-year-old female, not sure if I'm over-exaggerating for this post to be in this subreddit, but my parents won't let me, earn my own money? So basically, I don't have a bank account or don't get an allowance or any of that, but I want to buy my own stuff, which they probably won't let me buy, like clothes and merch and anything for my interests, to be honest. I don't want to ask them to give me an allowance, since they'll say no or just get angry saying that we can buy it for you. They won't. You don't need it. Stop copying everyone else. And they're completely against me having a bank account until 18. So that's out of the question. So I asked them, can I get a job? Like maybe do tutoring online over the summer, because I'm not allowed out of the house unsupervised, so I really can't get a part-time job somewhere local. And since I'm excelling in my academics anyways, so I'll have time. But they flipped at me saying, "Do we not provide enough for you? Who gave you this idea? suggesting my friends have influenced me into acting like this, but I told them that it's because they don't let me buy my own stuff, so I'll work for it myself. So now they just think I'm dumb and disrespectful for even suggesting it, and under a bad influence by my friends. But I think they're saying it because they want me to focus on my GCSEs for next year. But I still want to earn my own money, but it seems impossible without a bank account since most stuff I want is online. To me, it sounds like they're trying to infantilize you. They're trying to hold you back. You're out here saying, listen, I'm doing well in my schooling and I want to be able to make my own money. I want to get a job. If I had a 15-year-old kid and they said, I want to get a job, I want to do some online tutoring, that would be awesome. I would be so proud of them. I don't understand how they can act like this. They want you to be their baby forever. They don't want you to ever move out. They don't want you to be able to support yourself. They want you to do well in school and then, what, stick around forever? Dashful Vanilla wrote, are there any families nearby who have young kids who could use a babysitter or parents helper? Or an older person who could use a companion or someone to help around the house? Do you think your parents would let you do that at least? It doesn't require working papers or anything you would need parents for. You could advertise with flyers or something like that. But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. Now, if you want to hear another absolutely crazy entitled parent story, check out that video on the left. Or if you missed my latest video, check out that video on the right. That said, I'll see you all next time with some more stories.